I love electric vehicles. I love their instant torque and their silent running and the potential to break our addiction to fossil fuels once and for all. And in Australia, with sales of virtually all EVs and the wait list blowing out to at least 12 months, seems like you do too. But sometimes you can't beat a perfect gas-guzzling V8. The sound, the torque, combined with off-road ability and all the virtues of a dual cab ute. Like this, the iconic Ford F-150.
It's electric!
What? This is a Ford F-150, but it's called the Lightning, which means this car is not powered by fossilized plankton. For the first time, it's an F-truck powered by electricity. Nestled in between the rungs of its ladder frame chassis is a 98 kilowatt hour battery, unless you go for this version, the range extended version, which gets a 131 kilowatt hour battery. Now that's enormous by EV standards. The result of that is pretty spectacular though. It's an F series, which means it's all-wheel drive. It has 2 electric motors and the combined power output is 433 kilowatts and, not even got to the best bit yet, 1050 Newton meters. This car is capable of getting from 0 to 100 fast. But perhaps more importantly is range. It's a big heavy car, but because it's got an equally big battery, it'll do nearly 400 kilometers, about 390, says Ford. I was really not expecting to be quite so surprised by this car. I was expecting it to feel a little bit more utilitarian, a little harder to live with, but actually the level of sophistication in here is unbelievably good. For a start, the level of equipment is fantastic. This huge portrait mounted central screen with really good intuitive touchscreen features, nicely integrated dial down here for a bit of real world solid controls. But the equipment level elsewhere is fantastic. I've got 240 volt charging down here, 12 volt, USB-A, USB-C, heated and electric seats. Now I have to say this is the top spec version, it's the Platinum. But even so, for a truck, this is something that used to be just associated with farm tracks and hard work, but now it's actually verging on proper luxury car status. But I haven't come to my favourite bit about this car yet. It is easily one of the quietest vehicles I've ever driven, and I'm including all luxury cars and I'm including all EVs. It is whisper quiet. Tyre noise is basically completely absent. There's a little bit of wind noise from I don't know where, probably the wing mirrors, but other than that, it is astoundingly quiet. It almost gets a bit unsettling after a while. I'm sat here by myself and it becomes almost too quiet. I'm looking to reach for the stereo or open a window or something. It is absolutely amazing. As for the ride quality, well, that's where this car starts to reveal a little of its truck underpinnings. It is a ladder frame chassis and it's got that classic kind of judder as you go over lumps. But generally speaking, it's very good. And one of the main reasons for that is it gets a coil-sprung rear axle. Now I know we've seen that before in things like the Nissan Navara and the Mercedes X-Class, but somehow in this car they've absolutely nailed it. I suppose for one of the main reasons is big cars like this ride much better when they're loaded up. Well, this has got a 131 kilowatt hour battery it carries everywhere, so it's kind of loaded all the time. Now I know I'm driving this car in the United States of America, its birthplace, so it really should fit in quite nicely, and it does. But the question I'm thinking now is, would it work elsewhere? Well, its size and heft has been way easier to live with than I expected. It's got tons of driver assistance systems, 360-degree cameras, parking radar front and rear. It is decked out to the hilt. But actually, I think it will work elsewhere. Perhaps not in places like Rome, you know, where you've got intolerably tiny streets and things, but Australia, quite simply, yes. I know its range is impacted dramatically when you start towing things. And it is a big car, but I think we could certainly live with its proportions. And we know F-150 demand is high enough for Ford themselves to invest in conversions to right-hand drive on Australian home turf. But the question I've got to ask myself is, why didn't they start with this car? Why not skip the middleman, jump straight to the destination we're all going with electric vehicles and miss out those gas guzzlers in between. This is a hugely impressive electric vehicle, and not in just the context of it being a ute. I mean, full stop. This is one of the best EVs I have ever driven. Ford is investing big time in its local operations here and where they build the plant in Dearborn at the Rouge factory. They're gearing up to produce 150,000 of these cars in a year, and they're already getting close. 50,000, they produce about 150 a day. So demand in the US, surprisingly, is huge for an electric ute like this. And I'm confident that if it came to Australia, we'd see exactly the same popularity. It can tow about 10,000 pounds, which is about, give or take, 5 tons. So it's easily up there with the plus size utes we already get powered by petrols and diesels. It's fast, faster than pretty much anything I've driven in this class. It looks great, practical features everywhere, huge tray, and if that wasn't enough, up the front, because there's no engine there, you've got a 400-litre boot, or fruit, or frunk, or whatever you want to call it. Perhaps the best way to assess how well this car would be received in Australia is maybe take it to the Denny Ute Muster. Now, years ago, I took a SsangYong Musso to the Denny Ute Muster, which you might argue was taking my life in my hands, but I was pleasantly surprised. The guys there might be driving Commodore utes and Ford Falcon utes for years and years, and I thought they would never ever consider anything else, but actually a reasonably priced South Korean ute was very warmly received. They could see the virtues of it, they could see what it did well. And I'd like to think that this car, even though it wears a Ford badge, it wouldn't necessarily be accepted because of that. I think it would be accepted because it just makes sense. Spending some time in this car on US turf reminds me of the words of a former Prime Minister who, let's be honest, is probably best forgotten. He said, electric vehicles, they're never going to tow anything, they're slow, they'll be terrible for tradies, and they're going to ruin the weekend. Well, if I ever had a one-on-one with him, I would say, the Ford F-150 Lightning. Enough said.